Welcome everybody to day 4 of National Clean Energy Week. To start today's programming, the Business Council for Sustainable Energy and Clean Energy Business Network are going to host a webinar on clean energy jobs now and for the future, a workforce on the rise. I first would like to thank National Clean Energy Week for the opportunity to host this event today. We've got a terrific panel and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. I would also like to thank Covanta Energy for the event sponsorship today. We couldn't do it without you. And I'd like to thank our co-host, Clean Energy Business Network. They are a small business division of the BCSE, and in a moment, you'll get to hear from their president, Lynn Abramson. Clean energy jobs have been on a steady rise over the past decade, topping over 3.4 million jobs at the end of 2019. The business conditions under COVID have impacted clean energy workers significantly, with nearly 500,000 unemployed since March. Bringing these jobs back in clean energy sectors and creating new ones can be a critical part of our economic recovery. And as demand for clean energy continues to grow, so will the need to have capable and well-trained workers, representative of the diversity of all of our energy customers in the country. In this webinar, clean energy executives will talk about their current and future workforce needs, challenges, and opportunities. They have workforce development and recruiting programs that they've developed, and they want to share those as best practice models for others in the industry. And it's important to note that there's a very broad range of clean energy jobs. They span things like very technical and analytical workers to important jobs on the front line, like customer service. So we need to think of clean energy jobs as not just a highly technical field, but really one that can bring in all communities and be an inclusive and growing workforce for our nation. As I mentioned, this event is being sponsored by the Business Council for Sustainable Energy and Clean Energy Business Network. We hope that you will join in the discussion with us and share your perspectives through the Q&A portal, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. It's my pleasure now to introduce our co-host, the president of Clean Energy Business Network, Lynn Abramson.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you for everyone for joining us this morning and to all of our panelists for participating in this conversation. This is a very important conversation because prior to the COVID-19 crisis, the clean energy industry has represented the growth sectors of the U.S. energy economy. And in fact, wind and solar accounted for some of the fastest growing jobs in America. Unfortunately, we still see nearly 500,000 clean energy workers laid off from their industries in the wake of this crisis. But as we rebuild, we can rebuild a cleaner, healthier, more resilient future for all Americans through the clean energy workforce. And so we look forward to hearing from some of our panelists today about how we can put clean energy workers back to work in communities across the nation and how we can do so with an eye towards economic recovery and greater inclusiveness in our industry. So with that, I would love to turn it back to Lisa to moderate the discussion with our panelists, and I greatly appreciate the BCSE and CEBM members who have joined us in this conversation this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. So let's get started. We're going to take this conversation in 2 parts. The first part is going to focus on workforce development, inclusion, and diversity, and hear from companies on their needs and the programs and partnerships that they have in place to cultivate and recruit clean energy professionals. The second part will focus on workforce issues in response to COVID-19. Who makes up this workforce? How has COVID impacted their businesses and their employment status? And what can be done? What's the role of the public and private sector to assist those employers and employees and continue on our growth footing? So again, we're going to start with the discussion about workforce development, recruitment, diversity, and inclusion. So I would like to introduce all of our panelists, and then I will break out into some conversations on our first topic. So in alphabetical order, and I would love it if you could just wave to the audience as I introduce you. We have Beau Butler, Valuation Services for Weaver. Welcome, Beau. Ben Evans, Vice President of Public Affairs for the Alliance to Save Energy. Welcome, Ben. John Steele, Senior Director of Government Relations at Johnson Controls. Good morning, John. Laura Thompson, Vice President of Flow Energy. Good morning, Laura. And last but not least, Michael Van Brunt, Senior Director of Sustainability for Covanta Energy. Good morning, Mike. So here we go. I'd like to open it up and just go back to that overarching question, and maybe I'll start with you, Mike. Can you talk a little bit about your workforce needs at Covanta Energy and your approach as you think about recruiting and cultivating new workers? And if you can share a little bit about how that's evolved and some of the challenges and opportunities you get through pursuing those types of approaches, that would be terrific. So the floor is yours, Mike.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa, and also thank you, Lynn, for both of your leadership in this area. We see workforce diversity and inclusion, all very broad issues, as being very closely interwoven. Our facilities and our business, we're really dependent on a very broad skill set. I think a lot of people are surprised at the variety and depth of skills that we have and need to operate our facilities. I mean, it can range from licensed boiler operators, skilled trades, welders, engineers, scientists, managers, sales, then finance and customer service. And that having such a broad range of disciplines and backgrounds really presents a big challenge for us in finding a pool of qualified candidates. And one of the things we've had to do, and we've learned a lot over the past few years, is the need to sort of dig back deeper into the pipeline, looking actually into the high schools, universities, and the military to make sure that we can access the talent pools that we need. Part of this is we've made a more formal internship program over the years, culminating last year, summer of 2019, we welcomed 64 interns from 36 different universities. And this interaction goes far beyond just sort of the need for filling, say, some work requirements over the summertime. It really helps us better inform the engineering and science curriculum. It provides us some contact with the university so that we can better match up the skills that we need with the ones that are being delivered at the university. And it helps us stay on top of research. We also actively recruit military veterans, anywhere from enlisted personnel to commissioned officers. And our current workforce is about 15% veterans. We've also turned very successfully to our local communities. And we found that partnering with local community groups can be a very effective way of reaching into the talent pool. Kind of a good story we had very recently, we were hiring for an operator and we didn't really get many respondents to it, particularly any from the local area. So we reached out to this group organization called Camden Works, located in Camden, New Jersey. And we had 3 qualified candidates from Camden applied. So it's really important to sort of reach out to those organizations and sort of involve them in that process. I think we're all in this industry kind of blessed or privileged to have the opportunity to have sustainability as a key selling point. We get a lot of applicants who are very excited about our mission and very excited about providing a key public need for more sustainable waste management. We have people all the way up to the VP level who come in and have read through our sustainability report and are actively interested in what it is that we do. And of course, there's also, the fact that we're providing full-time jobs with benefits that are paying well above national averages certainly doesn't hurt. And most of those jobs are full-time jobs. Over 90% of our regular workforce are full-time Covanta employees. And just to sort of circle back to the other issues that you raised, Lisa, it's hard to have any discussion on this without talking about diversity and inclusion. It's not only the right thing to do, it's really critical for our business. Given all the different expertise that we need, hiring and retaining a diverse workforce, helps us build a more successful company. And our CEO, Steve Jones, joined the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion in 2019. And, that's culminated in this year. Our VP in charge of continuous improvement is going on a bit of a sabbatical with that organization through what's called the CEO Action of Racial Equity Fellowship. And so that's sort of a really great opportunity for him and for us as a company. And we've set our own goals around increasing the share of diverse gender and race, ethnicity and representation across all levels of the organization, not just entry-level workers, but all the way up through leadership. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we have similar representation in our company as we do in which the communities that we operate and serve. Lastly, we can't forget about, once we hire somebody and bring them into the company, really the job's just beginning at that point for us. We need to make sure that we're continuing to develop those folks. So we've set a series of training programs from boiler operator training, frontline supervisor training to build those skill sets that we need moving forward. And to bring it back to that inclusion piece of diversity and inclusion, that is such an important key. It's one thing to bring in a diverse talent pool, but you need to make sure that they're empowered to bring their experiences and skill sets to the table, because that's really what this is about. We need to make sure that we're involving all those different perspectives so that we can be as successful as a company as we can.
No, that was really terrific. Thank you for sharing that. Just one quick question. You mentioned a number of really interesting programs that and initiatives and partnerships that Covanta Energy is a part of. Maybe we can share those in some way with the broader audience. But you mentioned Camden Works. And just briefly, can you explain what that organization does?
Yes, sure. And so that organization, it's really, the mission is to match up people in the Camden community with jobs local in the Camden community, and making sure we get that alignment with skill sets. And it's very much a two-way street. I think one of the things that we've had a lot of success with lately, I don't think we've always done a great job with it, but it's something that we're really focusing on now, is making sure we build those bridges between, us as an employer in a local community, the community groups in which, are very active in those communities, and then the high schools, vocational schools, local universities, because, I've found in my own recruiting work that we've done, that personal connection to a university professor or to a high school science teacher or math teacher or a guidance counselor is instrumental in helping to build that talent pipeline.
Oh, great. Thanks for taking a little extra time to provide a little more detail. We'll come back to you, Mike. So next, it's my pleasure to reintroduce John Steele with Johnson Controls. And John, would love to hear about Johnson Controls' approach. So thanks for being with us this morning. The floor is yours.
Lisa and Lynn, thank you. And it's my pleasure to be here. In a word, or in 2 words, workforce development is critical to Johnson Controls. Our HVAC workforce is graying and they are retiring, and not only for us, but across the industry. So we put a premium on creating a pipeline of young technicians coming in to the business. And that's done under the Johnson Controls Institute, and specifically it's called Career Pathways. And there are 3 ways that we work to invigorate this pipeline, 3 places where we go. High schools, technical schools, as well as prisons. And I'll speak to all 3 regarding this. That in urban settings, for example, we'll go into the high schools and we create these programs. And for all 3, these are done under performance infrastructure agreements, where the energy savings are such that on site, in that school, in that prison, we can literally stand up a classroom, where then students or prisoners are then taught how to be full-fledged, fully certified HVAC technicians, which then meets that primary need of that pipeline of new technicians coming into the business. And so again, we do it in high schools, we do it in these trade schools, and then also in prisons. And 2 examples of the prisons, which have been longstanding, is we have the program in Indian Creek Prison in Virginia, and we also have it at the Angola Prison in Louisiana. And these students, before they graduate, at first, of course, they're students, they're selected by the warden. The warden determines which of these prisoners are about 2-3 years out from being released and show the most potential promise to learn the HVAC business. Because what's critical to reducing recidivism is 1, employment, and 2, housing. And this HVAC program is extraordinary in providing these former prisoners, former offenders, work skills that allow them to have a full job that pays well. And in fact, on average, it pays about $50,000 a year upon release. And with the prisoner program, the recidivism rate is about 4%, and which is an extraordinary low number, where on average, the recidivism rate for released prisoners is about 70%. And so we're rolling that out, not only in those 2 prisons, but looking for other opportunities. And of course, on these curriculums with these trade schools and with these high schools partnering to do the same. So the 4 categories that we make available to these students, and they get absolute state-of-the-art training, they get state-of-the-art curriculum, books, et cetera, hands-on equipment to use. It's building maintenance, green HVAC technicians and mechanics, facility maintenance electricians, and building automation systems technicians. So there are a variety of ways for them to enter the business and to have a fulfilling long-term career, because we certainly need these folks, and we will continue this program. And so thank you for the opportunity to introduce this program. And after this event, welcome to speak to anyone who wants to learn more about this Pathways program under Johnson Controls. So thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, John. So yes, so maybe a little bit more specifically, how does Johnson Controls go about finding partners for the Pathways program? I mean, do they reach out to you, or are there other mechanisms?
Basically, the way it's done, Lisa, is through a performance infrastructure contract. So high school or trade school or a prison, Department of Corrections, excuse me, they need to overhaul their HVAC system. And so what we do is with them to have this performance infrastructure agreement in place, where the savings are so extraordinary that we're able, in partnership with them, to build this classroom into the high school, into the trade school, into the corrections. And with respect to performance infrastructure, if those numbers aren't hit in terms of the obligated savings on our part, then we write them a check for the difference. So both in terms of training and also in terms of energy savings, it's a win-win for our clients.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So the energy savings are basically paying for workforce training for a whole new suite of workers. And yeah, that's amazing. That's a really creative way of addressing the problem. I mean, I think in the next panel, we'll talk a little bit more about like federal responses and what the role of government should be. But one of the challenges and one of the issues that current legislation is trying to address is basically how do you pay for these programs? And that largely was looking at the worker perspective. You know, they may want to switch fields or get into a higher paying or a better career, but they can't drop their current paycheck, right? So how do we help them make that transition and cover the cost of basically getting more education or more skills? So it's, you know, so the employer sometimes can do it, maybe they can't, you know, what resources are out there. But what I love about it, because we're talking about clean energy jobs, is that you're taking the energy savings from energy efficiency and investing it in and providing those resources. So really exciting partnership. And I would say, John, I'm sure in your handouts, there's some more information on the Pathways program that if you go into the portal for this event, you can click into handouts for pretty much all the speakers, but I bet there's some more information there on this program. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
We're going to hear from Laura Thompson with Flow Energy. So Laura, good morning, and thanks for being with us. I'm not hearing Laura, but that could just be me. Laura,
Sorry, I need to unmute.
hey, you know what? On that note, I hope everyone feel free. It is on the Eastern time here. We're at 9:34. I'm gonna have a little bit of coffee. So anyone who's out there in the audience, feel free to have some coffee with us. And Laura, back to you.
All right, sorry for the little snag there. Thank you very much, Lisa. You know, as a small energy technology business, we are constantly challenged with the need for the expertise and the skill sets that are required to develop and implement projects that are on the leading edge of energy optimization. What we do, in brief, is to develop and deliver a technology that combines the hardware for providing the physical precision control of heating and cooling energy. We combine that with the data intelligence that enables continuously optimal performance for the life of that building. So for several years, we've been hearing about the need to focus on deep retrofits to continue to optimize our building stock. And the coming of age for AI, artificial intelligence enabled optimization, combined with these deep retrofits, has revealed a gap in the training of our future workforce to cultivate the ability to not only analyze and design such projects, but also to seamlessly and cost effectively install this type of technology in the field. Combining this need with our desire to promote STEM jobs for minorities and women provides yet an even greater challenge for us. Our emphasis in recruiting and subcontracting is, of course, first and foremost, is on the talent and skill set required to continue to develop and bring the highest quality and truly sustainable energy projects to the market. We need software developers who have knowledge of how energy systems work, especially in the area of heating and cooling of buildings, campuses, and also district energy systems. We need energy engineers who can coordinate their knowledge of analysis and design of energy systems with software development analysts, developing the platforms and the algorithms that continuously monitor, diagnose, and potentially correct the faults and instabilities of these systems via AI. And we need subcontractors installing our technology who have the ability to not only, install these mechanical and electrical equipment, but to have the critical thinking skills that allow them to coordinate with the IT personnel. The IT personnel that are integrating the installation of the technology with their building automation systems and with the cloud. Our customers, furthermore, need a facilities staff that are trained to interpret and act on the deep data and diagnostics that are being provided, but they're not used to getting. And we're finding that some of our customers are working on this new challenge to get good coordination between their IT and facilities workforce enabled in order to keep their buildings optimized. They often call on us to help with that coordination. So we're continuously exploring avenues to utilize and to bring inclusion and diversity into our company. Currently, we are working on programs to help technical, though tech type institutions and universities to attract and train young women and minorities into STEM jobs. As a woman-owned business, that's very important to us. We have many university customers, so we offer avenues for their students to participate in the data collection and analysis when we do projects for these customers. We work with their careers departments at community colleges, these technical institutions and universities that offer science and engineering degrees. We work with them to provide intern and entry-level opportunities to their students within our company. But not just universities. For example, we are currently working with the intern of an energy manager at a hospital, it's in Chicago, on the life cycle costing analysis of our technology to present to their CFO. Many of our customers' purchasing departments have diversity programs in place, of course. So we work with these customers when we're installing projects for them to reach out to the minority and women-owned contractors on their approved list to involve them in implementing our technology into their facilities. So those are just some of the few things that we're able to do as a small business to help with the workforce dilemma that we're facing.
Well, that's terrific. And, I'll let Lynn chime in here if I get the number wrong, but isn't it like 70% of small business employers, support clean energy jobs? I mean, the small business aspect of clean energy workforce is tremendous. So you're doing a lot for a small business. And I imagine that not everybody would understand the breadth and scope of those kinds of activities. Lynn, did I get it right?
I think it is in that neighborhood. I know nationwide, the 99% of employer-owned firms or employing firms are small businesses, but I think in the energy sector, it's a little bit lower. It is on that order of around 70%. But it is that I commend you, Laura, because I know it is challenging as a kind of growth stage company to just manage your business and keep things running smoothly. So to actually take that extra step to train the next generation of workers is really important. But I think it also shows the importance of recognizing that as your company grows, you're going to need those skilled workers. So
Yeah, I mean, what I
important.
really liked about what Mike, John, and what you said, Laura, a part of your strategy to cultivate and recruit employees is to work with your customers. So it's really ingrained in your whole business model, and you do it in different ways. But I think it's very impressive. One question that I had, and you all kind of alluded to it, but Lynn, through her leadership at CEBN and BCSE, we've been doing a series of discussions called the Powering Forward webinar series, and we've talked about workforce a great deal through that webinar series. And BCSE has surveyed its members over the summer on this whole range of topics that we're discussing today. And one of the discussion points that came out from our more recent webinar on this topic was the need to even go earlier and to try to reach students, even in elementary school or, kind of middle school level, and, increase their awareness of the different types of jobs in the energy sector, and in particular in clean energy sectors. And I'm just wondering if you're seeing a shift in that direction, or maybe you've always done that. We talked a lot about universities, but what are you doing any programs with younger students? And I'll maybe start with you, Mike, and just I'll cue everybody so we're not talking over each other. Mike, you are on mute.
I muted and unmuted and remuted. Sorry about that. No, that's an excellent point, Lisa. And I think the key is building that interest level wherever we can. And I think it's we consider a part of we've got some programs we've done with local schools in Camden and Essex, and focused especially in the early grades, around things like sustainable waste management, climate change, to at least get them sort of interested in the different issues that they're all going to have to really address and deal with as they get older. And then I think as making that transition from elementary school, where you're sort of focused on sort of basic science and basic issues around what is recycling, what is sustainable waste management, and then focus a little bit as we go through the middle schools and the high schools, and focus on how do we translate that into actual career opportunities for you, and how do you as a student take this interest that you have in helping address societal issues, provide for the needs that society has, and turn that into a job, and recognize that there are lots of different ways that you can do that. A good example for us is we've done this work up in Massachusetts. Traditionally, the maritime academies have been a huge pool for us in terms of bringing in people who are boiler operators. And we've developed sort of internship programs with the maritime academies that are increasingly focused on not only going into one of our plants and operating a boiler, but sort of understanding that broader context. And that's a good example that we can sort of leverage that experience through internships so that we can provide them sort of direct hands-on experience. But I think there's things you can do in the elementary school where you actually start teaching kids, okay, here's a bag of trash, and how would you sort this into different, buckets, and what might be suitable for energy and what might be suitable for recycling, and what does that really mean when we do that? And I think in all cases, you're trying to tailor that message so that it really resonates with your audience, whatever that might be, whether it be a kindergartner or somebody in a maritime academy who's been studying boiler operations.
No, thanks, Mike. John, any comments on this topic?
We don't have a program in the middle schools, Lisa, but I did write it down, and I'm going to take it back and see where I may go in terms of just introducing this as a career opportunity and interest in it. So thank you for the idea.
Okay, well, that's terrific. Hey, we're making progress, right? Laura, any comments on that topic?
Yeah, so, and that was a good reminder for me too, because in a previous life, my company worked with elementary school children on sustainability projects at their schools. For example, planting sustainable gardens or landscaping around the building. Currently, we work with the leadership program of our high school. They have a leadership curriculum, and we'll bring high school students in to work on specific tasks within our projects with the local high school here. So, but yeah, probably more we could do with that. Because I agree that starting the younger you start, especially with young women, getting them interested is pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, so we have just a couple minutes left until we're going to transition to the next panel. So I'm just going to give all the speakers an opportunity. If there's something you didn't get a chance to say and you want to say it, I'll go back to each one of you. But Mike, I just want to make sure that the audience understands, what Covanta Energy does, because you speak a lot about, solid waste management and recycling, but obviously there's an energy component here. Do you mind just reiterating what that connection is?
No, thanks for that, Lisa. It's kind of, you forget sometimes. So basically, we're the world's leading operator of waste energy facilities. And so we're focused on recovering the energy benefit of those wastes that remain after recycling efforts. And in doing so, we kind of help fill out the picture of how do we divert waste from landfills and put it to its highest and best use. And as part of that, we're actually part of the broader solution of reducing greenhouse gas emissions from waste and materials management. And in that role, we serve as very important partners with our municipal clients. And we have been working with municipal clients for decades, and many of the clients that we have, they're very focused on how do they advance more sustainable waste management. And I think that's one of the things that we always like to leave with people too, is that when we think about things like infrastructure and clean jobs, energy jobs, it's important to remember sort of, things like the waste management sector as part of infrastructure. I think we often think about how energy is infrastructure and roads and transportation fit into that. But there's this whole sort of world of, recovering materials and waste that's just as much a part of infrastructure and the fabric of our country as roads and electricity. We're kind of unique in that we sort of straddle both. We're in the electricity world and the waste management and materials management world. A lot of times our municipal clients, need that focus on keeping that infrastructure alive and well.
Thanks, Mike. John, any last thoughts from this panel that you'd like to share?
Just to thank you again. This is critically important, and I'm pleased to hear what my fellow panel members had to say. Johnson Controls is an innovator, but on the other side of the business, we've got to make sure that we can still roll the trucks, have the people who do the installation, the maintenance, the testing. So it's a critical balance and a dovetail that has to go on. And so this collective workforce development is important to all of us.
Thanks, John. Laura, any concluding comments?
Yeah, I would say that, again, as a small business, being able to execute our projects seamlessly and not run into, dragging things out and incurring cost after cost is important to us being sustainable as a business. And one of the things that we're finding ourselves doing now is spending time with contractors who haven't installed this particular type of technology, where I explained about the hardware with the going to the cloud integration, things like that, that we're on the phone training them ahead of the job. And, once we get them up to speed on how that technology gets installed, we try to stick with that contractor in that area. So just that it's going to be very important to, I think, everybody as we go AI in the cloud and data, smart buildings, that we start making sure that the technical workforce out in the field really gets what it's all about and it's what it's intended to do. So.
Thanks, Laura. That was great. Lynn, I don't know if you have any comments before I transition to the next panel, but I'll
the only other thing I would say is I really was struck by, with our three panelists on this panel, how strong the connections you are working to establish are with your local communities. And that was a theme that really emerged in the programs that you discussed. And I think that's something very critical for us to think about as an industry, because our communities represent the workforce of the future. And if we want to have a long-term game, what's the end game for our companies? How do we ensure that they have a long and successful future ahead, we do need to continually think about how do we build that pipeline of a workforce. But we also have to remember our communities are our customers. And I do think that these efforts to strengthen those relationships with everything from, school children up to newly trained workers, I mean, you're building relationships with your customers. So I think that's very strategic. And so I just want to commend you all for the work you're doing and for sharing these examples. And hopefully these will provide some ideas for best practices for other companies that are looking for ways to strengthen their customer base and their future workforce.
No, that was very well said, Lynn. I'm not going to try to top that. So thanks to all of you, and stick with us because if we have time at the end, we can go to panelist questions for everybody. But now I am going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about unfortunate situation that we've had all as a country in the health crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's also impacted our economy, as we know well, and it's impacted the clean energy workforce. So this panel is going to discuss, what did our workforce look like before March of 2019? Where are those workers? What segments of the clean energy economy are they in? What have been the impacts to those workers, and what can we do to support them at this time? So I'm going to turn first to Ben Evans to kind of give us a big picture, lay of the land. And Ben, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and thanks, Lynn, for hosting this event. It's great to be here. I appreciate you including us. And thanks, of course, to CREZ for putting on a great National Clean Energy Week. I've been watching a good bit of it. It's just been a fantastic show on politics and clean energy, two of my favorite subjects. So Ben Evans with the Alliance to Save Energy. If you're not familiar with the Alliance, we are an energy efficiency advocacy group based in DC, focused mostly on federal policy. We're a membership organization. We have utilities, technology companies, manufacturers, NGOs, and other organizations that are members of our group and who, in one way or another, support our mission, which is to develop and advance policy that will move energy efficiency in a positive way across the economy. And I'm going to talk just big picture about what's going on with jobs in the clean energy sector writ large, but obviously through the lens of mostly through the efficiency sector, which is the largest part of that economy and which has seen some pretty devastating effects. And if you haven't seen them, I would definitely recommend. There are reports that environmental entrepreneurs and ACOR and a couple of other groups have been putting out monthly, where they're breaking down Bureau of Labor Statistics data and really crunching the numbers to highlight what's going on in these sectors. And it's been invaluable in telling the story and making people aware that look, it's not just restaurants and airlines and hotels that are getting hit as a direct result of this crisis. These job losses are a direct result of the COVID pandemic, and they're massive. So I definitely recommend those. As Lisa mentioned at the outset, we started 2020 in a good place. The clean energy economy employed almost 3.5 million people. That's across renewables, storage, efficiency, all of it growing in recent years at a very good clip, 2 to 4%. It's a surprise, I think, to a lot of people, again, that energy efficiency is such a large part of that economy. People tend to think of energy efficiency as more conservation or tinkering around the margins with turning off lights and things, but it's actually a huge industry that touches on every sector of the economy, and 70% of those jobs in clean energy are in energy efficiency. And what do those jobs look like? As Lisa and others said, there's a lot of diversity in the types of jobs, but at their core, 70% of those jobs are construction and manufacturing jobs. And with the vast majority being in construction. And another point you mentioned about small businesses, these are small business jobs. 80%, it's energy efficiency, and I'm not sure what it is writ large across the whole sector, but 80% of the energy efficiency companies in the United States, there are more than 300,000 energy efficiency companies, are small businesses with fewer than 20 employees. So these are jobs that are spread across the country. There's a study that showed 99.7% of the counties in the United States have energy efficiency jobs. I'm surprised it's not 100%. But you know, they're everywhere. This is not red state, blue state stuff. This is across the country in rural communities, urban communities, everywhere. And that's true also with obviously on the renewable side as well. And so what has happened is we had this hard shutdown in March and April, and you had, you know, immediately in the efficiency sector, 430,000 jobs by the end of April disappeared. More than 20% of the workforce disappeared. And, you know, it's people didn't want workers coming in their homes to put in insulation or put in a new HVAC system or work on their ductwork. People didn't, you know, utility efficiency projects shut down and construction work sites shut down. And that then affected the supply chain and the manufacturing side. And so it really spilled out. And what we've seen is that kind of settled in over the summer with PPP and perhaps people better understanding the, you know, the virus and how it spreads, and maybe being a little more comfortable opening up work sites and things like that. But we're still, with the growth is just not, we're crawling back. By the end of August, the efficiency sector was still at a net loss of about 360,000 jobs. And for a little bit of context, that's twice the size of the entire United States coal industry. So it's a huge amount of jobs, and we need Congress to do something about it. It's very, you know, it's just disappointing that Congress has not even been able to get past the more immediate, you know, let's do unemployment insurance and state and local assistance and things like that, to get to the more forward-looking, how are we going to rebuild this economy? I know there is some anecdotal evidence out there that some contractors in some sectors have been doing pretty well in this economy, because people have more time on their hands to do projects and things like that. But I think everybody I've talked to understands also that with when you have this many unemployed people, the fundamentals of the economy are not right. And unless something changes, we're going to have a long winter and we're going to have a long 2021. And, you know, the way that we can address that is through policy. There is very specific sector-specific policy that Congress should be taking up to look ahead to 2021, 2022, where we can rebuild these jobs. And one example, Ruth, I'll give before, I know I'm running low on time, tax incentives. So under, you know, back in the recession of 2008, Congress passed a pretty robust tax incentive for homeowner energy efficiency improvements, you know, upgrading your HVAC, putting in new windows, putting in insulation, and it worked. The activity around those projects just, you know, multiplied 7 or 8 times, and that, you know, created billions of dollars in economic activity and jobs, and we can do that kind of thing again, and we should be doing that kind of thing again. So Lisa, if we have more time, I'm happy to talk about more of what's happening.
I hope we do. I am just going to make a couple quick comments in response to what you were saying. You know, so we're all over the country on this panel, but I'm located in Maryland, and in the part of Maryland that I'm in, you know, my children are doing fully online learning, and I know that's not the case in all parts of the country. But I have noticed, because my elementary school is a couple blocks from my house, the school is vacant, or primarily vacant. And they are putting on a new roof, and they're doing a range of upgrades to the school. And I know that, you know, as we've worked, Business Council and CEBN have worked with the Alliance to Save Energy and others, we've been trying to come together with a safe and appropriate kind of strategy to say, look, you know, we have critical infrastructure in communities, whether it be schools or other buildings, and if they're not going to be utilized for a period of time, now would be the time to kickstart that investment, to make them more resilient, to make them, you know, tighter, and more modern and up to date, so they serve the students and the faculty better. So it's interesting at this moment in time, because in different parts of the country, we're experiencing different scales of kind of getting back to some kind of new normal. And I'm certainly seeing, you know, that there could be a lot of demand if there was some assistance to make sure that those projects could be funded. And I know we've been exploring ways to have the federal government play a role. And then the last point is on the residential side. I mean, people are struggling, even if you do have a job, and this is a very uncertain time, but everyone anticipates, especially on the East Coast, as the winter comes, we're going to spend more time in our homes, and they're looking to make improvements. So anyway, we could give them more resources to do it, provided it can be done safe. And I think there's a lot of demand. And I think if there were some support to help pay for that, people would very much appreciate it as they anticipate being in their homes a lot more in the next, 6 months. So anyway, maybe a bit of anecdotal response, but I wanted to share. I don't know if you have any reactions, Ben.
Yeah. Two things. Definitely, people are seeing their energy bills going up, and those of us who are fortunately still employed and haven't been hurt as much by this pandemic, perhaps have a little more discretionary income because we're not doing anything. People are, and this is the anecdotal evidence you're seeing, that people are looking for projects to do. And so I think, as people see their energy bills go up, they may look at, why not put some more insulation in the attic? And so encouraging people to do that will put people to work and will rebuild the sector. And then on the critical public facilities piece in schools, my kid's school down the street is doing the same thing. And I think some of them they're doing as much as they can, but to your point, funding is what's critical there. And John mentioned performance contracting as a way to do it. We have a proposal in Congress where the federal government could put up $20 billion that would leverage $80 billion in private funding. So what you're doing is you're spending a little bit of federal money, and I'm not saying $20 billion is a little bit, it is a lot, but you're getting a huge bang for the buck out of it by retrofitting schools, hospitals, community shelters, things like that. And what you can do is use the savings from energy efficiency, like John was talking about with some of the training programs. Those savings from energy efficiency can pay for most of the project. And then while you're doing it, you can add on these other things, improving the ventilation and circulation, making them more resilient, putting the HVAC equipment on the roof and things like that in Florida, so that you're knocking out several birds with one stone. And it's just a smart thing to do right now, and it's the kind of thing that Congress with a good down payment could create a lot of progress.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate you sharing your own experiences too. So now I'd like to bring Beau Butler into the conversation, and Beau, please tell us a little bit about Weaver and what you do. But my questions for you are mostly about how do we support businesses in this environment that want to keep workers on? I mean, we hear a lot about the Paycheck Protection Program and how that has really been instrumental for many small businesses to keep employees on, but now that's expiring. So kind of tell us a little bit about what you do, but also, what's going on with the PPP.
Well, first of all, Lisa, glad to be here. And I want to point out that it's been about a year to the date since I first contacted Lynn Abramson and Andy Barnes over at the CEBN about becoming a member. So coming up on our 1-year anniversary, we're thrilled to be part of the CEBN, part of the executive circle. I also really appreciate having gotten to know some of our friends over at Crest. Besides Rebecca, I've gotten to know Charles Hernick very well. Really appreciate all their efforts. Weaver is we're accounting, auditing, and advisory firm. We're based out of Texas, but we also have offices all over Texas, Oklahoma, California, and New York. And my day job is I'm a director in the Valuation Services program. I'm also head of the Green Biz program. But the past couple of months, I've been focused with a team of about 3 other guys from our Energy Compliance Service Group on processing PPP loan applications. So that has been and continues to be and is going to be a very robust part of our practice, probably through about March or April of next year, as companies come to the end of their covered period and they have to start filling out these applications. At this point, we don't know if there's going to be another round of funding. I don't think there's going to be one before the election, but I think that my gut tells me that after the election, whoever wins, there's probably going to have to be another round, because the Federal Reserve Main Street program has not gone particularly well in terms of getting money to small businesses, whereas the PPP program has gotten funds to at least 5 million small businesses. And I think week before last, Lynn and Ryan Fitzgerald over at Third Way presented results of a survey showing that PPP has been particularly important to the clean energy business. The participation rate in the PPP program is about 17% nationally, but it's about 55% of eligible companies in the clean energy business, according to their survey. So in terms of what businesses can do, probably the best thing now is that if you've taken out a PPP loan, you need to understand that the application process for forgiveness is very complex. We've built a model to handle that. And just to give you some stats, we've got about 25 payroll-related metrics that require 1 to 3 backup calculations each, with about a dozen logic tests throughout the model. There are look-back tests for salaries, wage rates, FTEs, not just head counts. There are exceptions for seasonal workers. There are exceptions for employees that were released under certain circumstances. The SBA just came out with an exception for rent paid on company or on related entities. There, you've got to split your employees between those who make under 100,000 versus over, and there's a certain way to calculate that. If you've got a biweekly pay period, you've got to resort to partial period calculations. The point of all that is that it's very complex. And at a minimum, if you're filling out the application, you need to have a third party look it over, because the last thing you want to do after having struggled through COVID-19, after having gotten the PPP loan, is to have the SBA deny it because your calculations are wrong or you don't have the right documentation. The other thing that you can do is, have someone like my group actually help you prepare the application. We've got a lot of business owners who are saying, look, I'm trying to keep my head above water. Filling out this form is not the highest and best use of my time. I'm going to give it to you guys, and you do your model and do your Excel pivot table analysis, and I'll keep on running my business. So that's really the message I think that people need to hear is that the loan application forgiveness is necessary. It's a great thing. It's also very complex. Don't try it at home.
Boy, well, I think, again, to reiterate really what's at stake, we're talking about potential forgiveness of this loan.
Yeah, you're talking about the difference between getting a free, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's a very significant amount of money. It's the equivalent, right, of almost a half year of, maybe half year is too much, a quarter of business expenses for a given company. That's how the calculation is originally made, I believe.
Yeah, it's, mostly it's on payroll, but we've got some clients that got loans from between $3 and $7 million. And imagine the impact if that loan is because of poor documentation or calculation errors is not forgiven. All of a sudden, in addition to all the other challenges you've got trying to keep your business afloat, now you've got an extra $3 to $7 million worth of debt that has to get paid back. So,
right, it's a really big deal. So, I really appreciate you sharing this. Again, I know this is something that CEBN has been looking at closely. BCSE had an opportunity to testify before the Senate Energy Committee in June on energy sector impacts of COVID. And this is a big thing that we talked about was the Paycheck Protection Program and how helpful it was, but all the uncertainty that exists right now in terms of how beneficiaries should respond. There's news stories, and I think, as you said, it's unclear if anything is going to happen before the election, but even a couple weeks ago, I know people that were getting emails from their banks that help them, get these loans saying, don't put your application in yet because there could be some changes. It's very confusing. So I think is your advice is well taken. So, we had a question come through on the chat about different types of clean energy sectors that we didn't discuss yet. And one of them was about the hydropower industry. And I'm very pleased that the National Hydropower Association is one of the BCSE board members. And I'm going to do my best to try to respond, given some of the knowledge that I have on the hydropower industry. But I know that there's a DOE hydropower vision report that whoever put those questions forward should check out. And then there's a report from the NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, that talks about job issues. But as I understand it, currently there's about 66,000 hydropower jobs, and they are all dispersed in every state. But what's interesting, as I understand it, about the hydro industry, I mean, there's a tremendous opportunity with improvements to existing facilities, or incremental hydro on on dams that have not yet been utilized for electricity generation. Plus, there's pump storage, which, as we all know, storage is critical for integrating clean energy technologies. So there's a lot of demand and a new kind of energy about the hydropower sector and job growth in the sector. So I hope that at least gives somebody a little bit of information, so they'll go and look at those two government reports that I mentioned. And thanks for the question. So we have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to go back to Ben and to Beau first. If there's a comment that you didn't get a chance to make that you would like to make, otherwise and then I'll put forward just a concluding question to everybody. Maybe just think about quick responses to that. And I'll just tell you what the question is going to be, so for all the panelists. Again, this is all about workforce issues. If you had one piece of advice for a potential employee, clean energy professional, what would it be? So that's the question for everybody. But let me go back first to Ben and Beau. Anything you didn't get a chance to talk about that you wanted to?
Not on my end, thank you.
Okay.
I mean, I agree with what Beau said about the outlook in terms of things not looking good before the election, and then what does it look like after the election? Do you it's hard to find a scenario where either party has a strong incentive to do something until the new Congress starts in January. And it's pretty much the only scenario. It's sort of status quo election outcome, and then where you could probably see something happening this year.
So, I mean, waiting, basically. I mean, yeah, that's very challenging, especially when we think about the Paycheck Protection Program, because if those resources are winding down, to be waiting until another 4 to plus months, that's very concerning. So we need to keep tabs on how this next phase of the COVID-19 pandemic and business conditions impact our workforce, for sure. We'll continue to survey our members, and I know CEBN will do that as well. So now I'm going to go to the question that I posed for everybody. If you had one piece of advice to give to somebody who was interested in getting into the clean energy workforce, what would it be? And Lynn, you and I will be included, but at the end. So let me start. Oh boy, Mike, you spoke first. So let's go to you first, please.
I was hoping I would go to the end. That's okay. It's hard. I mean, there's a lot of advice out there. I think obviously it's always never stop learning, but also I think be flexible with how you get into the workforce or into this field. I mean, there's a lot of different jobs that are out there in terms of the clean energy sector. To me, I find one of the most rewarding things being involved in the sector. And some days I'm wearing a compliance hat, other days I'm wearing an engineering hat, and other days I'm wearing a sustainability or community hat. So it's be flexible and find your way.
All right, great. Thanks. John, how about you? What's your piece of advice?
Yes, thank you. Be open-minded. The industry is constantly innovating. And again, just be open to new ideas and new opportunities.
Thank you. Laura. Oh, Laura, you're on mute.
Yeah, trigger for that. Yes, along the same lines, I think being flexible and being open. I remember as a very young engineer many years ago, I thought energy efficiency everybody would be efficient eventually, and I'd have to be finding a new career, but it's continuously innovating, and there's so many avenues you can go, whether it's the technical side or the business side or the development side. So yeah, it's an exciting place to be, and just go for it. Be open.
Thank you, Laura. Ben, what would your piece of advice be?
I guess it would be take initiative, jump in. If you really find yourself driven toward this kind of a career, don't be shy, go find an internship, go find a way to get involved in it, and give it a test drive and see what it looks like. I wasn't as focused in my college days to know exactly what I wanted to do, but if you are, that I would say that.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on that. Then we'll resume the order because that was going to be what I was going to say is just kind of be proactive. And maybe I'll add just, show your passion. I know when BCSE looks for employees, we want the skills that we need, but really what gets somebody, kind of a higher look is their passion. And sustainability and clean energy, those are things to be passionate about. So don't be afraid to show your passion and be persistent because, the first opportunity isn't always going to come your way. But if you are persistent, it will pay off. I've seen that with many people I've worked with, and I've experienced it in my own career development. So now I'm going to resume. I'm going to go to Beau.
I would say that people need to be excited. And positively. Negatively, I would say, forget the political debate. Okay, this is a science question. It needs to be, climate change needs to be solved with science. And let's face it, that's what Americans are good at. We were the first to put the men on the moon, and we've got the brain power and the willpower. If we can get rid of this political debate about the reality of climate change, if we can get focused on the solutions, then let's just do it. Okay. To John's point about being innovative, think about the scope of innovation that's going to be necessary to decarbonize our economy. You're talking about reinventing every bit of infrastructure, every supply chain, every business model. That shouldn't be a cause of fear. That should be a cause of excitement and innovation. And if we do this correctly, if we get off this political dime of debating about the reality of climate change, we're looking at 20 or 30 years of unprecedented growth for the American economy. So solve the problem and be innovative, cast off these sclerotic, unproductive political discussions, and let's do what Americans do and go to the moon again.
Well, I'm going to let Lynn close it out on that because that was excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I might be biased in my response since my job is running a clean energy business network, but I think my advice would be to build networks and tap into networks because, those jobs are out there, as all of the companies on this panel discussed. So how do you learn about those opportunities? By attending events like National Clean Energy Week, by tapping into webinars, by signing up for both BCSE and CBN have newsletters that are freely available and you can learn about companies. There's a lot of resources out there to learn about this industry, to learn about the innovations that are taking place. And so we hope that many of the job seekers of the future will tap into those resources and join with us in driving change.
And that concludes this discussion, but please feel free to reach out to BCSE or CBN. And again, thanks to Covanta Energy to be our sponsor today, and thanks to National Clean Energy Week. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.